G'day everyone, welcome to The Locals, a new podcast series run by myself, Ariel, with John, Nick and Steve, where we discuss basically the modern and pioneer and probably standard formats, all the ones that the RC play throughout the year. We are kind of local grinders at our local game store, and we always try our best to qualify for these. Some have been more successful than others in the past, but we'll get to that in a bit later. So I'll introduce our co-hosts. We got Jun,
Hello.
we got Nick,
Yo.
and Steve.
What's up, everyone?
So, like I said, we all play together at our local. We thought we'd start a podcast discussing the formats that we are going for in the RC currently. It is the qualifying for standard, which I'm not participating in, but Nick and Steve, and I'm not sure, June, are you participating in that, June?
I will be, yes.
Yep,
I'm
they're
building the deck right now.
participating. But we also are participating in the upcoming RC in March, which will be modern format. And today's podcast will be focusing on modern and our deck choices for the RC, and why we think those decks will do well, and our kind of matchups, whether they're good or bad, and have a bit of discussion around those and see what everyone's kind of playing, and have a bit more insight into that. So, Pioneer, Modern, play Commander. I have played Standard in the past, but haven't really played Standard for quite a while, since probably Kaladesh. And yeah, that's kind of a bit of my background in Magic. So we'll go over to you, John. How long have you been playing Magic for?
Hey, yeah, so I've been playing Magic from 2019 when Throne of Eldraine came out. My most played format currently is Modern and Pioneer.
Nice. So a bit newer to the
A
Magic
bit
scene.
newer to the Magic scene, yes. Recently, like last year, I've been trying to more competitively. Used to play casually, but now
Getting
just
into the grind with
getting
us.
into the grind, yes.
Sweet.
It's not easy, but just trying my best.
No, it's all right. That's what we're going to be delving into to get everyone that's listening, and obviously our own kind of thoughts here with all the different experiences in Magic and different successes.
Yep.
All right, Nick.
Yo, so I've been playing since 2014. Kinds of Takia. That was the first set I played in. I played on and off from there. Took a bit break during COVID, and I've kind of gone back into it maybe 2 years ago now. I mostly play Modern and Pioneer, and I've started delving into Standard for the RC season.
And you've definitely been trying your best to
I
qualify.
have, yeah.
Yeah, very into it. And finally, Steve.
I've been playing Magic since about 2016. My first set was Origins. That's a pretty goated set. I played mostly kitchen table with my friends and stuff during that time, up to about 2018, where I started playing Standard. COVID hit. I stopped playing for a while, and I started playing locally at stores and stuff around the start of 2023. And since then, I've been a bit of a grinder like these guys.
Good to have you guys here and have a bit of a discussion today on modern specific and what we're going to be taking to the RC. We all play different decks as well and have different opinions, so it'll be interesting to get into that a little bit later. So yeah, like I said, we're all going to be going to the RC in March in Melbourne this year, in Australia, if you haven't already noticed from our accents. And what we're going to do is going to go through each of us and what deck we're taking, and why we think that deck will do well, or why we're playing that deck, and then what the good and bad matchups are, and have a bit of discussion surrounding those and whether we agree or disagree with our choices. So maybe we'll take it away with Steve. How about we take it away with you, mate? You tell us what you're playing.
Let's hear it.
I'm a Murktide guy. Probably used to be the best deck in the format. Has certainly fallen off since about Lord of the Rings. I haven't gotten too many new toys. Obviously, Unbanned and Preordained did a lot for the deck, but since then, even still, Haven't gotten a whole bunch compared to stuff like Scam, for example. But otherwise, still a very consistent deck. Still extremely powerful, but not quite as good as something like Scam or Rhinos these days. But regardless, still a
I
very
mean, I'd
consistent
say
deck.
I'd say it's definitely a top tier deck. Like it's definitely top 5.
I mean,
I
yeah,
still
it's
believe that it's top tier. Yes.
still very,
I think
still
like
very good.
yeah.
But still loses to Rhinos, loses to Scam, but
You reckon it
not the
loses to
best deck.
Rhinos?
It's not a favorable matchup, but
All right.
it's very consistent, which isn't bad. Obviously, it's very good. It has no real bad matchups, but it's still unfavorable in some aspects. But yeah, still top 5 deck, obviously, but there are decks that are better.
And how long have you been playing that deck for our listeners?
Since about June last year, so I'm a bit new to the Merc, but I've learned a lot in that time, and I think I'm at least decent at the deck. I want to say.
And you saying that you feel like you lose to Rhinos and what was the other deck you said?
Scam as well. Although
It's a Scam.
it's not a terrible matchup. It's unfavorable, but still certainly winnable.
Okay.
If you had to give like a percentage, what would you give it?
It's no more than
Like
60. No more than
60-40?
yeah.
Sorry, for Rhinos or for Scam?
For both, really.
Do you want to like delve into it?
Rhinos, for example, is another like kind of not instant speed, but similar kind of tempo game plan where one stuff up kind of loses you the game. One resolved cascade spell puts so much power on the board that it's not impossible to come back from, but it's certainly relatively difficult. Scam as well, if they can pull off their turn one scam, is again not good. Definitely winnable if you draw well, but again a little bit unfavorable.
What would
I
you
think
say
that's
will be
fair.
like decks that you go against that is like you're like, yeah, this is like almost a free win. Not really, but like you feel very confident.
Titan, big fan of that card on Holy Heat.
I feel like from my perspective as a Rhinos player, which we'll get into later, I feel like Murktide can build its list in a way to heavily hate on any other deck, basically. I think
Yeah.
I think Murktide's main board is really lean, and you can basically cut anything from it to improve any particular matchup, which other decks obviously can't do. Because the fundamental shell of Murktide is so slim, and you can see so many cards in your deck that I think Murktide is a unique deck that can play like one ofs or two ofs and just like consistently get through their deck to find those pieces. I also think Rhinos, not so much Scam, but more Rhinos. I think there are like specific silver bullet cards that Rhinos can't deal with. So, for example, like an EE or a Chalice that are really bad. To the point where like Rhinos is basically shifting their game plan from playing Cascades to playing like Endurances and stuff like that. What do you think about that? Like, I guess, how do you evaluate the matchup pre-board and post-board for Murktide?
Post board is definitely much better. Like you said, bringing stuff like Chalice or explosives is very powerful. It can be very good. Like you said, it's very difficult for Rhinos to deal with it. I mean, how do you even deal with like a Chalice on zero or an explosives? Like you have Brazen Borrow, you have Flame Veneer. That's about it. Like you mentioned, Murktide has a lot of one of like silver bullets that it can get pretty consistently. We've seen that recently. I've seen some lists cutting Dragon Trade Channeler, one or two Dragon Trade Channeler, to play stuff like Stern Scalding to counter like Griefs, which is an amazing feeling when you Stern Scalding an Evoke Grief. But yeah, sideboard is definitely full of like one ofs and two ofs that you can get to very consistently.
Yeah. Have
Really
you
helps
actually
matchup.
considered? I've seen some lists run Fable in the side for Scam.
I've
Thoughts on
thought
that?
about it. I've
Yeah.
definitely thought about it. I don't think it's like quite to that level yet, but it definitely helps with like card advantage. But I mean, again, that's what like the preordained and the expressive iterations are there for. I'm a much bigger fan of the questing druids. I think they fulfill like a similar purpose. I'm a big fan of the green lists for Murktide. Being able to just have a free 2 cards off Seek the Beast, I think is much more powerful than Fable. If you can build your deck in a way that maximizes Seek the Beast, it feels like it's like the best card in the format. It's brilliant.
I think my issue with Questing Druid and just the Green Splash in general is it kind of forces the Murktide shell from like a lean deck that can like adjust its game plan towards everything to more of a straightforward mid-range pile.
I've
I
definitely
guess like
found that.
having to. Oh yeah.
I have found.
I feel
that.
like, yeah. I feel like end turn like Seek the Beast and then untap, having to tap your mana to play those spells to actually realize the value of it can hurt against matchups like Rhinos, where you don't want to tap your mana, obviously. I actually think it's actively really bad against Rhinos. But yeah, obviously for matchups like Scam, it's amazing.
Yeah, you can also just Seek the Beast in kind of more specific ways. Something like Seek the Beast in response to anything, hoping to hit a counterspell or a force of negation, so that you can counter it instead of just always doing it end of turn. Like there are other ways that you can use Seek the Beast rather than just end of turn or during your turn to cast off sorcery speed instead of having to wait. So there are more than one ways to Seek the Beast.
Yeah, I feel like Murktide in general is probably like the most not so much easiest deck, but it's kind of good in a way that you're playing at tempo style and you're playing a deck where you're able to go through so much of your cards like you're saying and pick and choose what you need in that particular game, which makes it really good in general as a deck against most of the format. I just think that sometimes your threats, if they get answered really quickly, then you start kind of dawdling a little bit, trying to find something. And if you don't draw the right cards, that's when your opponent kind of gets to you, and they get the jump on you. And especially like if they can, get rid of like your Murktide, and then they've got blockers that can block your DRCs or your Ragavans, then you've really got not much else going for you. And then you have to find ways to kind of get rid of their board, which I feel sometimes like Unholy Heat, yes, it can be really good to get rid of stuff. But there's also a lot of graveyard hate in general in most decks now, even in main board, which sometimes can hit you and slow you down quite a lot as well. And definitely in game 2 and game 3, that does the same thing as well. It's kind of hard if they're bringing that graveyard hate to then get your threat to be something that's gonna punch through whatever the other deck's doing, because the other decks in the format are usually doing the more unfair things, for lack of better words, really, than what Murktide's doing.
Yeah, I mean, like Nick mentioned, it's a very slim deck. It's very like Legacy Delver esque, where you just play cheap threats, cheap and efficient threats, and cheap and efficient answers. So you're playing Lightning Bolt and Unholy Heat, two of the best removal spells of the format. For 1 mana, deals with most things. You're playing the best 1-drop in the format. The other best 1-drop in the format, Channeler and Ragavan. Then you're just topping it off with super powerful top end for really cheap. You're playing Murktides. Then you just play very efficient counter magic. Yeah, I mean, it does tend to dawdle, but, top deck iteration always helps you refuel. About the graveyard hate, I mean, it's not even that big of a deal. Most people play, and I'm playing Shredders at the moment, Legend Shredder, and that just kind of dunks on graveyard hate. The good thing about Murktide is you don't need the graveyard to function. Like, yeah, it's a nice resource for your Delirium, for making big Murktides, but you don't need the graveyard. And I think that's
I don't think you need a
also why the
graveyard,
deck is so resilient.
but what I was saying is that your Murktide requires a graveyard to obviously get it out quickly, and then your not sorry, Ragman, your DRCs are 3/3 flyers when you clear
Yeah,
them. If you don't have to clear them, they're just 1/1s, which obviously
is
in
very
modern
bad.
is very bad. So I'm just saying, like, if you have a 3/3 flyer or two 3/3 flyers, those are good threats. But if they're able to deal with your graveyard, then you've just got 3/1/1s, which don't do anything,
Yeah,
which then dawdles you. That's what I'm kind of getting at in terms of
yeah,
that remark. Yeah, but I think overall it's definitely a good deck.
yeah. Really solid deck.
I
So
guess
that's what you're
my Yeah, just as a final point, I think like Murktide is kind of fundamentally a very fair deck in the sense that it doesn't do anything like cheap. It doesn't like break any like rules, quote unquote. It doesn't like cheat stuff out. It doesn't like do any like niche combos or anything like that. And I
Yeah,
think that kind of play style is good for an open meta field where there's a lot of decks right now in the meta and you can kind of adjust to everything. You're not like pigeonholed into a specific strategy that may or may not just like not line up well. And I think that's where Murktide's strength is like of I think the top like 10 or so decks in the meta. It's probably the only fair deck. And I think that's like a good spot to be in.
yeah. Every other deck has something unfair that they're doing. Murktide just plays cheap and efficient threats, cheap and efficient
I think
removal.
I think Murktide's the best deck at punishing unfair decks. I guess that's the point.
Yeah, that's a
And
good way
if
to
there are
look at
no
it.
other fair decks, then yeah, Murktide can shine.
Let's get Jun involved, mate. What are you playing at the RC?
Hey guys, so I'm just gonna play the classic burn. Just burn everything at face. Been playing burns from last year for the first RC. I used to go top 8 before the Lord of the Ring got released, but due to now there's a lot of Yawgmoth players. I think I have 4 sideboard of Searing Blaze, Searing Blood. I mean, because most of the Yawgmoth creatures are either 1 toughness or 2 toughness,
Yep.
and I'll be still running Eidolon as main and having Rolling Vortex as side, because I still believe like Eidolon's still great. There's so many 1 drops and 2 drops or 3 drops that is played in modern.
I agree. I think Arlon's still good. I personally played 2. I think 2's a good spot. You probably could go 3 max. I'm gonna go 4, but 3 max definitely. And in Rolling Vortex, you don't have in your main board.
No, just side.
Mm.
Why did you choose that option?
Well, by the time I get Rolling Vortex, I feel like I deal more damage with with Eidolon instead of Vortex. Cause when I play turn 1, I can play a turn 1 creature like Swift Speed, and turn 2 I can play Eidolon and swing it at turn 3. But if I play Vortex at turn 2, most of the people now have answers for Vortex turn 2 still.
And I think that with the
Um,
downtrend of 4 color, Eidolon is good again. Fewer pitch elementals, fewer pitch cards. Eidolon is good again. Rolling Vortex is kind of on the downswing.
I guess I think the reasoning for the Vortex main is to fix the Rhinos matchup, which as someone who's played both sides, I can like comfortably say that that matchup is really bad for Baron. And Baron's only out is to turn 2 Vortex in that matchup. So I guess because Rhinos has such a huge meta share, it's the second most popular deck according to Goldfish at 13%. I think having that main board answer kind of gives you a huge edge for like what should be a minimal downside. Like if you look at the top decks, like the top 5, like which matchups are Vortex not good at? Not good in that Eidolon is good in. Like I'd say maybe Murktide is the only one where
Murktide,
you'd really like an Eidolon, but you would never want a Vortex. I think
yeah.
everything else is like fine. I guess that's the reasoning for it.
Yeah, because I think
Well,
it hits a lot. It hits like obviously Rhinos, hits on Titan, hits on Living End, in terms of like auto free spells they play. Is it? I can't remember the exact wording. Is it? Did I have to play it for free?
They have to pay for free.
Okay, so then you like
Is
If
zero?
no mana was spent, if no mana
Yeah,
was spent
if
to
no mana
cast
was
Yeah.
the
spent,
spell.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
So it hits like
yeah,
Pact from Titan.
Yeah.
It hits the Grief of Oaks.
yeah.
Yeah, which it and like in Scam, like
It
if
also
you're
hits
playing
the
that on turn 2, they've probably already done it anyways, and they can just play around that Scam.
yeah.
But more so like definitely Titan, they're looking for their packs to search for their Titan, so that's 5 damage going straight to their face. And then obviously Rhinos and Olivia doing the same. So I think it still warrants a discussion in terms of being in the main board, but I can see your reasoning as to why it's not there as well. I think it kind of depends, one, like what you're expecting to kind of see at the RC, and I guess we can have that discussion now probably as well in terms of what we actually think will be there. But I do think Scam will be prevalent. I feel Rhinos will be prevalent.
Oh, yeah.
I
Your
feel
board.
Murktide will be prevalent, and I think there'll definitely be some burn players, and I think there'll definitely be still some like control players there, but definitely Scam, Rhinos, Murktide. I would hazard the guess will be the top 3 most played decks. At the
I think that I think there's a huge distinction between the top tier and tier 2. Like I think Scam, Rhinos, Yogg, Murktide, Titan. I think like even on Goldfish, those 5 decks alone account for around 55% of the meta for just 5 decks. So I think it's really top heavy with those decks. And I think any deck that you bring has to have a decent plan against most of them, unless you're playing one of those 5 decks. I
Do you
guess
think-
like
Yeah. Do you think? I was gonna say, do you think there'll be a lot of Titan players, considering Titan is quite a difficult deck to pilot?
I would say it's probably the least popular of those 5, but I think you should definitely still expect to play one at least. Because
Yeah.
even though Titan is a niche deck, there is still a dedicated community for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. But like, that's what I was saying. I think in terms of the ones that I would expect to see the most, like I'm expecting to have at least 2 games against Scam, 2 games against Rhino, and 2 games against Murktide in like a 9 like match round. Right now, 9 rounds. I'm expecting to see 2 of each of those at least. Because I think again, those I think are the most popular decks. I think a lot of
Have
people.
have you heard of the concept of a winner's metagame? So the idea with it is that there are certain decks where everyone who plays those decks are kind of like specialists, or they're like really good because the barrier to entry is so high on those decks that for you to even consider playing that deck, you have to already be good at the deck going into the tournament. So I think Titan is one of the decks that you could predict that Titan is a winner's metagame deck where the higher you go into the tournament, the more likely you are to play into it because all the best Titans are at the top.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's an interesting way to
Whereas
look at
something
it.
like Murktide is so popular. Like you could be 0-2 and play Murktides, or you could be like 5-0 and play against Murktides. Like there'll just be
Exactly.
Murktides everywhere. Whereas Titan, it's its own niche thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying that I think, the other ones are the ones that are more likely to see. So those are the decks that I probably would look at trying to beat more so than a Titan deck. Yes, I would. If I do see a Titan deck, I'm going to be versing a good player, someone that's played a Titan deck, many years and knows their matchups inside out. And I have played against Titan multiple times as well, so I do know that matchup and know what they're trying to do. Where I think I can use that my knowledge in that advantage. But in terms of like building my deck to beat a Titan deck, I wouldn't necessarily go down that route because I'd be like, well, if I only see 1 Titan out of 9 matches, but I'm seeing 3 Rhinos, then I want to make sure that I can beat the Rhinos deck more so than the Titans deck.
I think that's more important than like specking your deck for Titan.
But I'll definitely have like something, a plan for a Titan matchup, definitely sideboard wise. I'll be
Obviously.
like, okay, this is what I'll be doing if I'm versing Titan. but it's more so like my main board will be like, okay, well, if I'm playing Rhinos and playing Scam, I'm playing Murktide, this card does well against all those 3 decks, so I'm going to keep that card in the deck, in the main deck, as opposed to, okay, well, this one card does really well against, Murktide. I'll keep that one card in, and this card does really well against, this certain deck. I'll keep that one off. Like, I'm just trying to like be a bit more across the board, kind of going, okay, what's a card, what's a strategy that would work well against these matchups, and do I have cards in my deck that
The
would?
RC is open deck list, correct?
Correct. Yes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, you can make those strats before you sit down. Or when you
but
sit
you've
down,
got
I
to
guess.
already got to have your deck ready to
Yeah,
go,
but
right?
like, I mean,
Yeah.
turn 1, turn 2 sometimes is like figuring out what your opponent's playing. So like against
Oh,
Titan,
yeah,
for example,
definitely.
they play an Urza Saga, it could be, one of 3 decks. But if you know it's
Yeah.
Titan, you gotta
And
play
that's something, that's something that's interesting as well. Like, I've never played an open deck list before, and I think that's going to be a big factor in terms of your opening hands, because you're going to go, okay, well, I know I'm versing Scam, so what's the best opening hand I can have against that, and how many times can I mulligan to get that hand that it won't punish me.
Yeah, a lot of
Same thing
advantages
against
coming from.
Rhinos. Like, what's the one card that I really want to look for against Rhinos, and how many times should I mulligan to get that card before I kind of go, okay, what is this? Too many mulligans now.
A lot of
Yeah,
big
and also
advantages.
because like different decks just play at different resource levels. Like against Scam, you don't really want to mulligan that many times because you really want the cards. Whereas like against Rhinos, you want to mulligan more aggressively because you want to find the specific answers to my
Correct.
deck.
And then also
Yeah.
looking at like draw and play,
Mhm.
that as well.
Yeah, like if it's like Murktide versus Rhinos, like you really need that like turn 1 Darcy, and then you need that counter spell on 3 for the Cascade.
Yeah, and that's gonna be interesting and a whole other kind of like level to think about. So, what do you think? Like Burns' worst matchups, John?
Well, worst matchup. I feel like it does have hard time against like turn 3 clock decks like Rhinos and Living End. Like turn 3, they do their
Interesting.
Cascade, catch their big creatures, and turn 4 they just swing at you with all their creatures. I feel like Yawgmoth, I can outrace them with like Searing Blades or Searing Bloods, removing their 1-drop creatures and keep burning their face. I feel like Murktide is a 50-50. Whoever goes first. I think Burn is more favored when they go first. Amulet is also a gamble. If they have a good hand, then you're screwed. But if they have a bit of a slow start, then I think it's okay in Burn side.
I would actually say that Titan is your worst matchup by far. I guess as someone who also plays Baron, I think Baron's worst matchups are Titan, Rhinos, and Living End.
See,
I think
that's interesting because I was going to say, when I was playtesting my Living End deck, which was what I was considering to play at the RC, I was really, really struggling against Burn as a Living End player.
Oh,
I
I
just felt
guess
like
I guess like the assumption there is that the Living End is running Leyline of Sanctity, because I think of all the meta decks, I think Living End runs it the most likely, or most Living End. It's most prevalent in Living End, and I think Baron has a really hard time against
Yep.
Leyline of Sanctity.
Most time I play against Living End, they sideboard in Leyline, and they always have Leyline on their
Yeah,
opening hand,
always.
and it's a bit of a hard time. And that's why I've got to play more creatures and hopefully win by creatures and burning myself to trigger the prowess triggers.
right.
So before the bans, I was actually a huge Baron fan. I thought Baron was like the secret tech, because for the sole reason that it beat the top 2 decks, which was Scam and Omnath at the time with the Beanstalks. But since that ban, I think like when I evaluate Baron as a possible choice, since I still have the deck, I just don't think it beats any of the top decks. Because again, the meta is primarily consisting of 5 main decks, and I think of those 5, it gets smoked by like 3 of them. It gets smoked by Rhinos, Titan, and Murktide. Yogmoth's a bit iffy and Scam's good. So I'm not sure how you fix those matchups. Like I think Titan is a matchup that you can't fix at all. I think even if you run like 3 or 4 Path to Exile side, I think it's still not enough. And Rhinos is, I guess Rhinos is a bit fixable, but still not good.
Boris Burn used to be top tier, and the meta was pretty high before the Lord of the Ring. But after the Lord of the Ring, now the meta is like 2%.
Yeah, I just don't
What?
see how it's playable.
Yeah,
What about deflecting palm against Titan? Because that's what I would be playing.
I think the problem is it's really easy for them to play around it. Because they have the Titan plan, they have the Valakut plan. Some lists run Hydroid Krasis, and you just gain like 20 life, and it's just like they're just out of reach.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think like good Titan players can basically play around everything.
yeah.
I also think Defecting Farm is a terrible card. I think it's a trap. I don't think you should ever play it in Burn, but that's my personal opinion, which we could debate if you want to.
I like the card. I rate the card.
It is a pretty good card.
Defecting Farm?
It is something you can get them off guard.
I think at the RC level, especially open deck list, when they know you have it in your deck, they can easily play around it.
That's
And I think
true.
most of the time that Palm, I guess when I test with Palm, maybe half the time I have a Palm in hand, I wish it was just another Bolt or another like burn spell. Because the Palm is like I guess like the core tenet of burn is that it's hard to interact with. You can't interact with burn spells that go face. But you can interact with Palm. You can play around it. You can't play around like searing like any of the brand spells unless you have counter spells. But I think having deflect and palm gives them an avenue to like interact with you, which is like the worst thing you want, obviously, because Baron's also sort of like a fairish deck where as soon as you measure the power level of Baron compared to other decks, Baron is like the worst deck in the game, in the meta, because it loses to everything, but the only thing it has is it's fast.
All right. So open deck lists? Do you think playing like the palm in an open deck list meta, does that make your opponent think even more about swinging with their Titan? That slows them down, even if you don't have it in your hand. So then it gives you enough time to maybe you might have like you might keep the 2 mana open. You're having lightning helix, let's say, and then they go, well, I don't have a plan for if I attack right now, and I have deflecting palm, so I'm not going to attack and play the safe route, and that gives you that chance to do that extra bit of damage. Do you think that might be something to think about or consider?
So is the implication with that that the Titan player is making a player error in that they're playing around a palm that they shouldn't be, or is that more
So
the
like if they
palm just
know that the
represents?
opponent's playing a palm, right? Let's say they go, okay, well, this guy's playing. Let's say my deck list. They're playing one palm main board, and they've got 2 more palms in the side, and they're in game 2. They go, well, they're obviously going to be siding that in. So now, when they've got 2 mana open, and I'm swinging, I need to be wary that they could have a palm that could kill me, or that could, be detrimental to me. So maybe do I play around that? The fact that they
I
might
think,
have that palm.
yeah, I think that is like an edge scenario that might come up some percentage of matches, but I just think that that's like overwhelmingly low compared to every other match where Titan has like so many different avenues to win. I guess like yeah, so like I think like if I was playing Burn, I wouldn't play Palms unless I maxed out my Path to Exiles, because I would never play Palm over Path to Exile, because I'd rather have Exile, which also hits like a Dryad, not just the Titan, because shooting the Dryad also stops their dingo, the Valakut plan as well, which is another way they play around it.
100%. I would also have paths, as well. But yeah, just thinking like in open deck list, then because they know what you've got, right? So they're gonna go, okay, well, if they've got a path, they've got a path, because they can't really do much about that. But if they go, okay, well, if they've got something I can play around, do I play around that, or do I just go for the swing now and then hope?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you want me to go, or do you want to have a go, Nick?
Right, all you, man, all you. I've been
You want
talking too
me?
much.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I am currently on Tron, and as my co-hosts here, who've played me many times, especially over the last month, understand that I kind of play a little bit of a hybrid deck between E-Tron and Green Tron. It's probably more closer to E-Tron. than Grey Tron. But I've been playtesting that for a while, and I think, in my opinion, it's got good matchups against most of the decks in the format. And there's a plan for each one of them in the main board. And the other deck I was considering was Living End, which I really like the playstyle of Living End. I like how it's got a lot of ways that it can interact with and keep its plan in check and protecting it. But I just felt like it was really struggling against Scam, and at the time as well, Burn was really struggling against that. So I decided to, after playtesting that a bit, decided to go back to Tron, which is a deck that I've been playing for probably. It's not my first modern deck, but it's probably my second or third modern deck that I built. My first one was Burn, probably like most people. And then I've played Tron and my counters company, what's it called? Vizia, Devoted Druid deck. That's something I've played for quite a while as well. Which these days is just really a Yawgmoth deck. I would
Yawgmoth.
Yeah. But I have been playing Tron quite a lot, so I'm quite, I guess, confident and comfortable playing Tron. Since I've been playing it for probably the last 6 or 7 years. But yeah, the way I've built my deck, I have Chalice as main board. So 3 of those are main board. I have 3. I've just upped it from 2. I went to 3 All Is Dust, which I think is really good against most, pretty much most decks in the format right now. As a really good one-sided board sweeper. And then you've obviously got the Khan, the sideboard tech that usually Tron decks play. Got the 1 ring, 3 in the main, 1 in the side. And then I've got the 1 Ulamog as my really big Eldrazi. And then I got 4 Thought-Knot Seers and 4 Reality Smashers. I'm playing 20 lands, with one of them being a main board Besaju, and I got 2 more Besajus in the sideboard. And I feel like the deck is really good in a way where you can kind of go 2 different routes. You can go really, really aggressive with it by playing your Eldrazi Temples instead of your Tron lands. If you have a hand where you've got like a Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, and you've got an Eldrazi Temple in hand, usually what I like to do is, unless I can 100% guarantee I get Tron on turn 3 with the opening hand, I'll play the Eldrazi Temple first to hope to draw into a second one to play the Thought-Knot Seer on turn 2, which then gets me a really good position to win the game, and then turn 3 follow up with a Reality Smasher and swing in for 9. And most of the time, if I can do that, it's really hard to lose from that point. And then the other way, obviously, is going and getting your Tron pieces and then playing your Khans and your bigger threats like a normal Tron deck would. Yeah, so that's my choice at the moment. I'm still not 100% in taking that to the RC, but I think it will have to be a really good argument for me not to play it at the moment. I'm really leaning towards that. But yeah, that's my choice. And in terms of like the matchups, like I said, I feel really good against Murktide. I feel really good against Rhinos. I haven't played York that much, but the times I have played it, I've won. Scam is a bit 50-50. It really depends on what my top deck is and what my draws are. And what I'm looking for against Scam is I want to be able to get, the perfect scenario would be having all 3 Tron pieces in my hand, because they can't get rid of that. So as long as they got that, and then I'm just praying that I get something really good off the top. And then the only other bad matchups would be Titan is a bad matchup. I've only got really Chalice to stop them searching for Titans as my main kind of thing against them in game 1. And also other Tron decks. I'm weaker against other Tron decks because I'm more kind of lower to the ground and they're much bigger threats than I do, or more, I guess, copies of bigger threats than I do. So my Reality Smasher isn't going to get through their Ulamog or their Wormcoil engines. Those are the ones that I I feel bad against. And then Burn and Hammer, I've got the Chalice there, which can slow them down, and also Trinisphere, if I can get that on turn 3, can also really slow them down as well. So there is some play against them. So yeah, that's my choice at the moment. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess my first question is, why would you play this list over normal Tron, like green Tron?
I feel like this list gives me, like I said, it gives me a couple of different ways that I can play the game, and that kind of keeps my opponent on their toes because they might be not ready for a turn 2 Thought-Knot or a turn 3, Thought-Knot and Reality Smasher coming their way, which you can't do if you're just playing the Tron decks and putting that early threat on the board. And I feel like a 4-4 and a 5-5, yeah, isn't the greatest threats at the moment. It was much better a few years ago, but it's still a relatively good threat, especially the Reality Smasher with the trample. It does get over most other creatures in the format on a turn. Like if you had played out on turn 3, let's say, you're more than likely going to have that being the strongest creature on the battlefield.
So I guess what you're kind of saying is like you kind of want that proactive plan
Yeah,
that like
because you
normal
you
Tron doesn't
can.
have.
Yeah, and I think the Thought-Knot Seers can be really good in some matchups as well. Getting rid of stuff like against Rhinos or Living End, if you can get rid of their key pieces or one of the key pieces that they need, that they, otherwise if they were versing Tron, they wouldn't necessarily go, oh well, I don't have to worry about this piece getting taken away from me. When then if they've got to see, oh, there's a Thought-Knot Seer in this deck list, they might take that from me. Yeah, then they might be like, okay, well, what do I do if that gets taken from me? And can I come back from that?
I can see the reasoning there, especially since the meta right now is very combo heavy. So having like hand disruption does seem like a good choice. I guess like I'm not really sure. I don't really have any opinions on it. But like what do you think of like Blood Moon in the meta right now? Now that every deck that can play Blood Moon is playing it because of Titan.
Or Magus.
Yeah,
Or Magus.
I think Magus is harder to deal with. I've got the 2 spatial contortions in the main board, which I think is other people play Dismember, and Dismember has its pros definitely, but in my time playing Tron, I feel like the 4 life that you lose sometimes can be quite a drastic
It's definitely relevant.
payback. Yeah, it's definitely relevant, especially when you don't have many ways to gain life in Tron. The only way most Tron decks would be Wormcoil Engine, sorry, is getting their life, or Haywire Mites, which only gets the 2 life. And I've got, as you guys know, I play the Haywire Mites, obviously, but the Flesh Gorger as my life linker. And solely the reason is because its ward, I think, is quite backbreaking for most decks to deal with, and also with Solitude in the format where it was a bit more prevalent before. And maybe that's something I can change. Definitely, I'll be open to changing. Going back to Wormcoil Engine, but with the Solitude, they'll have to like pretty much pitch a card and lose 7 life to exile my creature, and then give me 7 life in response to that. So I think that was really good card to play. Maybe it might not be with the current meta, but yeah, I think the life gain is hard, or to get back with Tron, especially against like Burn. If you're versing Burn, sometimes getting that Wormcoil Engine down might not be enough. It might be too late by then, because you have to swing in with it to gain that life, and you're usually playing that Wormcoil Engine and then passing the turn, and it gives them enough time to just finish you off. In my experience, tends to happen more often than not. They finish you off right after you cast your Wormcoil Engines.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I think the big thing is I think Magus is on the rise compared to Blood Moon. Personally, I'm running all Magus on my runners list, which we'll get to shortly. I know Scam is running mainboard Blood Moon now as well, like a 1 or 2 of. I think like turn 1 Ragman, turn 2 Blood Moon is almost unbeatable as Tron. But
Yeah, you've still got the one Beseiju that you could always search for, but then if they've got multiples of Blood Moon, then you're screwed there. But like, you've got some ways to get rid of it. You've also got, if you can get to Khan and getting that Haywire Might down as well, you can get around it. Like I said, Magnuson Moon is a bit harder because you've got to have the specific creature removal, and usually even like other Tron lists only play like 2 of those, and then the only other way to do it would be board wipes, which cost a lot of mana. Obviously, if you got Blood Moon out, then you aren't getting your Tron online, or a Walking Ballista. Even that, you have to pay 4 mana for the Walking Ballista. So that's getting a couple turns. You got to first play your Khan, get the Walking Ballista, and the next turn play the Walking Ballista, and hoping they're not, thought seizing you the turn before to get rid of it.
yeah, that makes sense.
But you guys have played it quite often now. What are your thoughts on that?
You don't play Ring, correct? You don't play the Ring?
I do. I play 3 main, 1
I play.
side.
Okay, so you play Ring. Yeah, a resolved Ring is usually very bad.
Because when I play Murktide and when I play Rhinos against like you guys, obviously Nick and Steve, and there's obviously a couple other players that we play at our local. But I feel really good in those matchups. I feel like I'm ahead in those matchups.
Yeah, it takes a very specific set of draws for me to win. I can't overcommit to the board because I might get hit by All's Dust, but I need to be aggressive enough for you not to get too much leverage out of a Ring or a Khan. So I have to play very specifically against you.
So my opinion on the deck is I've only played against it as Rhinos, which it's pretty unwinnable, obviously, with all the chalices. It doesn't seem like I can fix it at all, which I don't really plan to, just because it's so niche and I'm never gonna play against it in a competitive setting. But I'd be really curious about the Murktide matchup, because traditionally Murktide is really good against Tron. Tron traditionally has no answer to turn on Darcy or Ragvan and just hold counter spells and play tempo.
Oh yeah, I mean,
It's probably the best matchup for Ragavan. I think there's, other than Dismember, which I guess is a new addition, pretty much every other deck has some kind of answer to it, except for Tron.
yeah, I mean it's
I
pretty
think
much
I
the
think
same.
Tron has it with like they've always played Dismember, and I've got the Spatial Contortion as well,
I think
specifically for those.
I think Dismember was a new addition in the Lord of the Rings Pro Tour last year, because before Dismember they played Gigantha. So I think Dismember was new, but I'd be interested in trying play testing it as Murktide, because I think it shouldn't be good for you. It should be bad, actively bad, in my opinion. Especially if the Murktide's on Maguses. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean turn one Ragavan, like you said, it doesn't win the game on the spot, but it is certainly puts you in a great position. Like I said, I can't be too aggressive or else I'll run into an All's Dust, but I also can't dawdle because then Khan or Ring just kind of takes over the
Yeah,
game.
but I think the Tron player having to bank on a 7-mana board wipe is really bad for them, because if it gets countered, the game is almost over at that point.
I mean
I
that's
think
also consideration.
I think Tron's the worst deck to play against. I think traditionally the decks that beat Tron are the counterspell decks, other than Control, obviously, because they can't apply pressure. But I think Murktide playing as its traditional tempo plan doesn't seem like it should lose to Tron. Maybe that's different with Chalice's main, but yeah, I'm not too sure.
I mean it just requires more testing, I suppose.
Because when I'm versing Murktide, I don't care so much about Ragavan, because when you hit the only thing that you hit that will be relevant is the One Ring. Everything else you can't play. Generally because
I think it's
either
the
it costs too much
treasures.
mana, or B, it needs specifically colorless mana.
I think the treasures are the big thing.
Yeah, obviously the treasures,
with,
but then
yeah.
you could play, if you get a Khan down, then the treasures are irrelevant at that point, right? Because they can't crack them anymore. So the thing with them is, yes, I think you really need to keep a counterspell up for an Ugin or a All Is Dust. But then the other thing is, if you're leaving that counterspell for those cards, knowing that I'm playing that, then you're letting a Thought Not Seer or a Reality Smasher or another threat of mine come down that you could have otherwise countered. But then if you do counter that, then you're using your counter spell. And again, you're only playing like 4 counter spells, and then you got not many people play a lot of force negations. It's probably one of sometimes.
Yeah.
And then the spell pieces, sometimes the spell piece with 2 extra mana, like Tron can pay that. So spell piece sometimes isn't that great either. Spell piece like turn 1 to counter a map, yeah, that's really good. But when you're in the mid to late game, that spell piece kind of doesn't look like a really good card at that point in time
a lot of the
as a
time.
Murktide player, right? And so you're looking more for those counter spells. But yeah, then that's the thing. I've got a deck where I'm going to be playing a Relay Smasher, or a Thought Not Seer, and then you're going, well, that creature's bigger than my Ragavan, that creature's bigger than, all my creatures that currently. It's just going to stone block those, and then it's going to give them more time to be able to set up and play bigger stuff and get more mana, and then you're just going to be behind. That's how I feel when I play that matchup.
I think the big reason why the treasures are so important is that Murktide's card advantage tools are primarily sorcery speed, so Preordain and EI. And I think the treasures let you play those on your turn, but still have mana up to hold for counterspell. So you're both playing the digging spell to find the counterspells, and also playing them on the same turn cycle. So like turn 1 Ragavan, you can go Ragavan on 1, turn 2 hit, and you have 3 mana, so you can Preordain and still hold 2 mana for a counterspell. And then turn 3, if that Ragavan's still on, you can EI to hit your 3rd land, and then you'll have 2 treasures, so you have 3 mana at that point. And you're just like constantly digging and applying pressure at the same time. And I think that loop is what's unstoppable. I don't think it's necessarily like specific like one-off cards, because like realistically, when you play Tron or control decks against like prowessy tempo style decks, usually one answer is not enough. You just gotta get to a point where you're just jamming answers every single turn. So I think like Tron's win con is sort of like resolving a ring to be able to draw so many cards to then jam like removal every turn. But I think Murktide is so good at playing against that, because playing a turn 4 ring feels really bad against Murktide. If you've ever played ring deck, like you'll know how this feels. It's just like, holy shit, please don't counter it, because if it gets countered, you're probably fucked. Because like at that point on turn 4, it's like what they got like a Ragavan, maybe like 1 or 2 Darcy / Shredders, their Delirium's on, and they're just like ready to go.
Yeah, 100%. But if you're able to have other cards that you can play as well, if you've got 7 mana at that point, right? Then you've got like, if you don't get down, the ring, then you can also, you still got a couple other options that you can play, whether that's a chance for 1, whether that's
Like I guess
being
the
able to spell it.
assumption is you have Tron on 3.
Yeah.
So you get to the point where you can play more than one spell a turn. So I guess that the question there is, why not just play mono green Tron at that point? Because mono green Tron is much more efficient at getting Tron on 3 than E-Tron. Because mono green Tron has way more cantrips. They have all the maps, Silver Scrolls, etc. If you really cared about the Murktide matchup, I think regular Tron is so much better than.
That's what I'm saying. I think the Murktide matchup is good for me. I felt like, for example, this week when I versed Steve, I lost. The only reason why I lost is because I had natural Tron and I didn't draw any more lands. If I had one more land, if I had 8 mana, I would have been able to get something through, and I think I would have won that match.
You also just got outplayed, but we don't have to talk about that.
Okay.
But definitely, like, I feel like I would have won that match if I had that 1 extra mana to play those 2 spells. Which is like, again, like just unlucky that I only had the 3 lands for the whole game. So, but generally, like I said, I think, I don't know. That's been my experience with it.
I think it'd be interesting to record your matches, not like record like the scores and stuff over time. So every time you play against Steve's Murktide or just Murktide Tron, you can like record it and then like tally up the win loss over time and see.
Do you know how many times you beat me, Steve? Because I feel like that might be the only time you beat my Tron deck.
I think it is. Yeah, it's maybe in practice I've beaten you a couple more times, but when we're actually playing at weeklies, you tend to beat me. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't. I think that was the first time I ever lost to a Murktide deck at a weekly.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And we know we've got like Jad, for example, who plays it as well. I've versed him a few times and I've beaten him as well. So I'm just saying that's my experience where I've just been lucky against you guys, but I feel quite confident in that matchup and the Rhinos matchup as well.
It'll certainly be a good idea to tabulate our wins and loss. Just kind of getting data
Yeah,
and improving that
we
way.
We should start doing that and report that back here.
Yeah.
Have a weekly recap.
Sure.
All right, Nick.
How about we talk about
you've been
rhinos?
talking about Rhinos all night. You've been talking about how good they are in these matchups.
I love
all night.
Rhinos, yeah.
Why do you think Rhinos is the way to go?
So I've got a couple of criteria. I guess I don't have a specific allegiance to any specific deck. When I choose my decks, I like choosing the best deck. So I guess when I was evaluating the meta, well, for context, I've played Rhinos the most, but I also do think that it's also the best deck to pick. I think, so I really value matchup spread. I think being able to beat the best decks or having a plan against them is really important. And I think of the top 5 that we've mentioned, I think Rhinos is the only deck that is even or better against all of them. So it's even slightly good against Scam, it's really good against Yawgmoth, it's even against Murktide, and it's really good against Titan. It's the only deck that has that good of a spread. I also think it's really easy to play. So in a tournament setting, not like minimizing unforced errors is really important. Not screwing up your lines or anything. I think it's really important. I think having a really strong proactive plan when you play against random tier 3 decks is really good. If I play against something like, I don't know, creativity or whatever, I still have that really proactive plan where I can just go lion, cascade and just make them deal with it so they don't have time to play whatever they have. I think that's about it. Rhino's good deck.
Criteria for what you take into consideration?
I'd say those are the main ones. I'd say the main one I think is matchup spread. I think Rhinos is the type of deck that has a lot of flex spots. I think maybe 8 in the main that you can play whatever you want. And I've experimented with different options. So the Flame of Anors that are really good against Scam. I've seen main deck Endurance, which are good against Scam, Yawgmoth, Rhinos. I've been trying 4 main Subtlety, really good against Scam and Titan. There's just so many ways. I think it's the only top deck that can actually build its main deck to beat the other decks. Whereas a deck like Murktide, you want your main to be as slim as possible and have your sideboard filled with silver bullets, just perfect answers. I think Rhinos is kind of the opposite, where you have so much free room to play with that you can just jam your main board with silver bullets. You can just have Mystical Disputes or Endurances in your main to smoke Murktide, or you can have 2 to 4 Flame of Anors to smoke Scam, or you could have etc. 4 Subtlety to smoke Titan. I think it's easily the most durable deck. I think it can beat anything. I think the only bad matchup of the top 10 or so is probably Living End, which, I mean, fair enough. Living End pretty much designed to beat Rhinos. You're not in Living End unless you want to beat Rhinos. And even then, it's really bad, but I wouldn't say it's completely unwinnable. I'd say it's maybe 70-30. I have won games in RCQs, or won matches in RCQs against Living End. Yeah, I think that's it.
What about in the mirror? How do you combat that?
I think the mirror is the biggest thing that I've had issues with. I think mostly because there aren't ways to fix the matchup, as in there aren't ways to build your deck to have a better mirror matchup. The most you can do is have 4 Mystical Disputes in the 75, but other than that, the matchup pretty much comes down to whoever cascades more. So I think the only real solution that I found is Commandeer in the side, because resolving Commandeer is it's almost game ending. But Commandeer is also just a bad card, so it's something I've been juggling with if I want to include it in my 75. But yeah, more testing needs to be done
Surgical?
for that. That's just terrible.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Surgical also gets hit by Cascade.
Oh yeah. True.
True.
It's really hard. It's really hard to board like to tech into rhinos as rhinos. That's the biggest thing. But yeah, no, I think my plan for the RC is to tech for scam pretty heavily. I'm pretty sure I'm going with the full flame of an orb in the 75, 100% actually. It's just so good against scam. Like it pops a chalice and draws too, or like kills their whatever dude and like does other stuff.
Is there much other tech against scam, or is it mostly the flames?
There's also Brotherhood's End that I've been thinking about. I think Brotherhood's End. I think Scam's biggest threat is Douthie, because Douthie obviously they get the rhinos, the crashing footfalls as well. And if they have the Undying, they can do it twice, and it's just a disaster.
Yeah.
I think Brotherhood's End turn 3 to wipe the Douthie into turn 4 Cascade is really good. I think Endurance is really good. Definitely on 4 of Endurance in the side. Really good against Scam and Murktide. There's also this one card, Wolfpack Ambusher, which I really enjoyed. I think it's legit against Scam. Mostly because they like what is Scam on now? They're on like 3 Chalice, 2 EE or something. Like something like ridiculous. Like 4 to 6 hate pieces for Rhinos for the Cascade. Yeah. I think Wolfpack Ambusher is just like Wolfpack Ambusher. It's so good. Yeah, no, other than that, I think that's it. Like my list is pretty stock. I don't really try to like change a lot of it. Yeah. Magus is over Blood Moons, of course. So good. It's so good against Titan. Titan has no answer for it. Other than Dismember.
Yeah.
Which is like a 1 of, 2 of.
Fair enough. I mean, I think obviously it's at the top of the meta for a reason, but and that's why it's there because it can do really well against majority of the top decks in the meta. And then that's a big reason as to why I'm playing Tron, because I know I can beat that deck.
I think definitely you need to have at least even matchup against Rhinos. I think that's like really because Rhinos is also like it's really popular. Like a lot of people are gonna default to Rhinos because it's easy to play. Like it doesn't take time to invest to get good at it. Like a
I feel
Yogg-Moth
like
or a
Scam is
Murktide.
also up there as well.
Yeah, 100%.
As an easy kind of deck. It's a deck that just plays itself, and that was another option I had coming to this RC, and I've played Scam as well, but I just personally don't like the play style of it.
Yeah, I used to play Scam. 100% agree. It just feels really like low agency. Like you make like 2 decisions and that's the game.
Correct. Your decision is what your opening hand is it good or not?
Yeah.
And then
the mull is definitely the hardest part of it. Like knowing mulls. Yeah.
And then everything just plays itself out really. All right. So what we'll do is obviously come back once we've done the RC and let you guys know how we did. There might be some changes in what deck we might play on the day, but that's what we're looking at right now on, what is it today, the 28th of January. So pretty much a month and a half, maybe a bit less out. That my math's correct on that, boys?
It's about 5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then what we'll do is maybe we'll do like a little weekly roundup of our locals and report back here and see how our matchups went. Continue to kind of delve a bit deeper into maybe, what we're expecting to see and the specific kind of ways we'll play against those decks and our strategies against the top decks and what we're looking to do with our specific decks. Maybe that might be a topic of conversation in our next podcast. So unless you guys have anything final to say,
why don't you guys tell us what the best deck is in the comments? What you guys are bringing to the RC and why we're wrong and you guys are right. Put that in the comments. We'll talk about it next time.
Do all that good stuff. Hashtag TikTok. You know how it is.
Exactly.
And we'll see you guys all next week. Thanks for hanging out with the locals.